What if I told you that the King of England personally intervened to block a member of his own family from entering a royal estate? Reports suggest that Queen Camilla, in a shocking move, tried to claim the late Queen's property for her own relatives. And that's not all. Legal orders were issued in secret, palace aides were scrambling, and whispers say this could trigger a royal feud the monarchy hasn't seen in decades. King Charles III had always carried the weight of history on his shoulders. As heir apparent for decades, he learned early that being royal meant more than titles or ceremonies. It meant navigating a world full of unspoken rules, expectations, and loyalties. But nothing in his upbringing could have prepared him for the quiet tension that was brewing behind the gilded doors of Sandringham House. Sandringham wasn't just any royal property. It had been a sanctuary for the family for generations, a place where private affairs were kept secret and public eyes were kept at bay. Yet, insiders now whispered that this calm haven was on the verge of a storm. And at the center of it, Camilla, the queen consort, who was quietly asserting influence over properties that traditionally belonged to the late queen. Most people saw Camilla as poised, refined, and loyal. But the palace records tell a different story. Years before the scandal, aides documented subtle moves she made to strengthen her family's position within the royal network. In fact, she had once quietly requested access to lesser-known estates for relatives, a request that was quietly denied, and almost went unnoticed by the public. Meanwhile, King Charles had been diligently planning his own role as monarch, balancing public duties with family obligations. Reports suggest that he took the preservation of the late Queen's property very seriously, even consulting legal advisors to ensure everything was ironclad. What many don't realize is that, historically, disputes over royal estates have often led to deep family rifts, some lasting decades. One 20th-century precedent involved a minor consort's claim that nearly triggered a constitutional crisis, but was quietly resolved to protect the monarchy's image. The calm exterior of Sandringham masked the rising tension inside. Senior aides were reportedly concerned about Camilla's ambitions, while Charles remained determined to protect the family legacy. Documents suggest he warned his closest confidants, "We cannot allow any personal agendas to override the Queen's wishes." And yet, for months, whispers grew louder. Courtiers noticed subtle maneuvers, legal memos quietly drafted, private meetings held in hidden chambers, and unusual correspondence with legal advisors. What seemed like normal palace operations was anything but. The stage was set. What no one outside those walls could see was how fragile the family's unity truly was. And in that fragile balance, a single misstep could ignite a scandal the monarchy might never fully recover from. The question now loomed: would King Charles be able to stop what was coming? Or had the calm before the storm already passed, leaving the palace teetering on the edge of chaos? It all began with a quiet legal filing, almost invisible to the public eye. Camilla, according to palace insiders, submitted claims on portions of Sandringham House and other private properties that had belonged to the late Queen. On paper, it looked like routine paperwork. But in the hidden corridors of the palace, it was anything but routine. King Charles reportedly discovered the filing within hours. A senior aide described his reaction: "He was calm, but every muscle told you he meant business." For decades, Charles had been preparing for moments like this, moments where family loyalty collided with duty. He knew that allowing Camilla's claims to proceed unchecked could set a precedent that threatened the monarchy itself. What made the situation even more explosive was the secrecy surrounding the estates. The late Queen had always ensured that property rights were carefully guarded, often restricting access to all but her closest advisors. Did you know that in the 1980s, there was a near scandal when a minor royal attempted to claim an estate outside the line of inheritance? The matter was hushed so effectively that most historians only uncovered it decades later. Camilla, however, seemed determined. Palace sources suggest she had been quietly preparing for months, meeting with lawyers, and even discussing potential inheritance claims for her family. A memo leaked to staff described strategies, contingencies, and ways to assert claims without public scrutiny. But the palace legal team moved quickly, drafting notices to block her access before any physical steps were taken. The tension between them was almost tangible. Reports claim that private meetings became heated, with Charles insisting on the sanctity of the late Queen's will and Camilla pushing for flexibility to include her relatives. Behind closed doors, allies took sides. Some courtiers quietly warned Charles that ignoring the claims could spiral into a full-blown family crisis. Others cautioned Camilla to tread carefully, reminding her of the monarchy's long-standing legal protections. And here's a surprising historical fact. The royal family has had similar disputes over property dating back to King George V. In one case, a consort's attempt to expand family influence over estates led to years of tension, private settlements, and even temporary estrangement from the royal household. It was a precedent no one wanted repeated. By the end of that week, the palace was buzzing with activity. Lawyers reviewed every clause, aides were tasked with monitoring movements, and Charles made a quiet but firm decision. Access would be blocked, no exceptions. But the spark had been lit. A single filing had awakened months of ambition, secrecy, and tension. What no one outside those walls could see was the quiet battle of wills unfolding in real time. And the question now hung in the air: would this legal blockade be enough to stop the brewing storm, or was it only fueling a conflict that could erupt in ways no one yet imagined? The moment whispers of the Sandringham dispute leaked, the media erupted like a dam breaking. Headlines screamed of betrayal, property battles, and palace lockdowns. Camilla versus Charles, one tabloid shouted. Royal family feud threatens legacy, blared another. Social media was flooded with speculation, memes, and heated debates. Every detail, real or rumored, was dissected by millions worldwide. But here's the secret few people knew. The royal family had been preparing for exactly this kind of media onslaught for decades. After scandals in the 1980s, including the aftermath of Princess Diana's struggles, palace communications teams were trained to handle leaks, control narratives, and slow down potential public panic. One insider revealed that encrypted channels were used to track every rumor about Sandringham, a digital web of palace intelligence few outsiders could imagine. Despite these precautions, the frenzy escalated. Journalists camped outside the estate, cameras flashing day and night. Drone footage captured movement in restricted wings. Anonymous tips circulated in tabloids, some true, some fabricated. But the palace remained silent. The king and his legal team refused to comment publicly, letting the media chatter fill the void. And here's a shocking fact. Palace archives show that King George VI once faced a similar public pressure campaign over royal property. Leaks and speculation had nearly forced him to make concessions he didn't want. Lessons learned from that era helped Charles navigate this storm more strategically, choosing restraint over reaction. Yet tension grew not just outside, but inside. Courtiers worried that public opinion might turn against Camilla, or worse, against Charles himself. Every public appearance, every official statement, was analyzed and dissected by the press. Rumors about secret alliances, hidden agendas, and family rifts spread faster than any official news release could control. Another surprising detail. Insiders claim that during the first week of the dispute, palace security monitored journalists' communications and even tried to identify potential sources of leaks. It was a rare move, but one reflecting the seriousness of the brewing scandal. Few outsiders realized that controlling perception was just as critical as defending property rights. The media frenzy also exposed the complex relationship between tradition and transparency in the monarchy. In a world of instant news and social media, centuries-old customs collided with modern scrutiny. The palace could no longer operate in total secrecy without risking public backlash, a challenge they had never faced on this scale before. By the end of the week, the palace realized the battle had two fronts: legal action to block Camilla's claims, and media management to maintain the family's public image. Both were critical. One misstep could make the Sandringham dispute not just a private conflict, but a public spectacle capable of shaking the monarchy itself. And the question lingered: could the royal family survive this dual storm of legal and media pressure, or was the feud about to become a scandal that would haunt them for years to come? While the media frenzy raged outside Sandringham, the true drama unfolded behind closed doors. The royal family, bound by tradition yet fiercely protective of their private lives, now faced a test of loyalty, power, and trust. What the public saw as a dispute over property was, in reality, a complex web of family alliances, whispered warnings, and carefully measured threats. King Charles summoned his closest advisors and senior family members for a series of private meetings. Reportedly, the discussions were tense, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Camilla's claim on the late Queen's property was more than a legal challenge, it was a personal affront. Sources say Charles's voice, usually calm and measured, grew sharp as he emphasized the importance of protecting his mother's legacy. "We cannot allow personal ambition to rewrite history," he reportedly warned. Inside the palace, loyalties were tested. Some aides quietly sympathized with Camilla, noting her years of service and her efforts to support the king publicly. Others rallied behind Charles, insisting that tradition, legality, and family honor came first. Courtiers exchanged letters, emails, and memos that documented both subtle alliances and veiled warnings. One leaked note suggested that certain advisors feared the dispute could escalate into an open family feud, the likes of which hadn't been seen since the 1930s. And here's a little-known fact. Decades ago, King George VI faced a private conflict that nearly split the family over property and inheritance. To prevent public scandal, the matter was resolved entirely behind palace walls. No statements were ever released. The lessons from that episode seem to have shaped Charles's approach, emphasizing discretion, control, and strategic decision-making. Private conversations reportedly became heated. Aides overheard remarks suggesting that some family members feared Camilla's influence might grow if her claims succeeded. Letters between the king and his confidants described strategies to contain the dispute, from legal maneuvers to public silence. One note allegedly read, "The eyes of history are upon us. Every decision must protect the crown, the legacy, and the family." Meanwhile, Camilla was not passive. Trusted insiders claim she met privately with legal advisors and sympathetic courtiers, exploring every avenue to advance her family's position. Observers noted that her calm exterior masked a calculated determination to assert influence, a skill she had honed over decades in royal circles. Another surprising detail. In royal history, disputes between consorts and heirs over estates often left lasting scars. In one case in the early 20th century, a property conflict resulted in years of tension and a temporary estrangement, only healed decades later through careful negotiation. The parallels were unmistakable. By the end of these secretive meetings, the palace understood one thing: this was no ordinary disagreement. The Sandringham dispute was a powder keg of family loyalty, ambition, and tradition. Every private conversation, every strategic move, was a battle in an unseen war, a war that would define the balance of power within the royal household for years to come. The question now loomed larger than ever. Could the family navigate these internal struggles without shattering their unity, or was this the moment when centuries of tradition might finally collide with personal ambition? The palace had long relied on the mystique of tradition to protect its secrets, but legal challenges were different. Camilla's claim on Sandringham and other estates wasn't just a family quarrel, it now entered the realm of law. Lawyers were called in, legal notices were drafted, and the quiet halls of Sandringham became a battleground for a confrontation few outside the royal circle could fully grasp. King Charles's legal team acted swiftly. Notices were sent to block Camilla's access, citing the late queen's explicit wishes in her will. According to insiders, the legal language was precise, leaving no room for interpretation. But Camilla's advisors pushed back, arguing that her family had a legitimate interest in portions of the estate, claiming that historical precedents allowed consorts certain rights. And here's a surprising historical fact. In the 18th century, disputes over royal estates often led to full-scale parliamentary intervention. One minor consort's claim required the king to petition the government directly, resulting in a legal precedent that protected estate ownership from personal disputes. The stakes for Charles and Camilla were, in some ways, just as high, a modern echo of centuries-old property battles. The tension inside the palace escalated. Courtiers described late-night meetings between legal advisors, palace officials, and even government representatives. Discussions focused not only on property law but also on the potential public fallout. What would the media do if details of the legal dispute leaked? Could the monarchy survive a public legal battle without losing its image? One shocking revelation: the royal family enjoys a unique legal status in Britain, often immune from certain lawsuits that ordinary citizens face. But in this case, even the king's authority was tested. Legal scholars noted that if Camilla's claim had gained traction, it could have set a precedent that altered centuries of royal property law. The implications were enormous. At the same time, the backlash began to trickle into the public domain. Rumors circulated that Charles was being overly strict, that Camilla was being unfairly blocked from property she had a claim to. Social media fueled debate. Memes painted Camilla as ambitious and Charles as inflexible. Historians warned that such public perception could erode the monarchy's reputation faster than any internal dispute ever could. Palace strategy became a delicate balancing act. Legal action was necessary, But so was managing optics. Reports suggest that aides were tasked with preparing public statements that emphasized tradition, respect for the late Queen's wishes, and the legal necessity of the King's decisions, all without directly naming Camilla. And here's another shocking fact. In 1917, King George V had to navigate similar legal disputes over estates after World War I, balancing public opinion, family loyalty, and the law. Some historians argue that how Charles handled the Sandringham crisis could be seen as a continuation of centuries-old royal legal strategy. By the end of the legal proceedings, it became clear this wasn't a battle over mere property. It was a clash of ambition, duty, and legacy. Camilla's claim had tested the monarchy's legal foundations, and Charles's response would define not only family dynamics but the very future of royal property law. The unanswered question loomed like a shadow over the estate. Even with legal victory secured, could the king truly prevent the fallout from reaching the public, or had the storm already begun to spread beyond the palace walls? The legal battles over Sandringham were over, at least on paper. Notices had been issued, Camilla's claims blocked, and King Charles's authority secured. But the echoes of the dispute didn't vanish behind the palace walls. Instead, they rippled outward, affecting not only the royal family's internal dynamics but also public perception and the monarchy's carefully cultivated image. Outside, media coverage continued unabated. Headlines praised Charles for defending tradition, while others criticized him for perceived rigidity. Social media debates erupted, with public opinion split. Some supported the king's commitment to his mother's legacy, others sympathized with Camilla's attempt to involve her family. Memes, viral threads, and opinion pieces ensured that Sandringham's story remained alive in the public mind, feeding curiosity and controversy alike. And here's a little-known fact. Historians have noted that public sentiment has long influenced royal decision-making. In the 1930s, King George V adjusted estate practices after media criticism over a minor inheritance dispute. Charles was acutely aware of this precedent, carefully managing public-facing communications to avoid inflaming further scrutiny. Inside the palace, tensions remained. Camilla's influence was temporarily checked, but aides noted a lingering unease. Family dinners were quieter, meetings more formal, and private interactions tinged with caution. Some courtiers worried that the dispute had created lasting rifts, while others believed it had exposed weaknesses in how power and property were shared among consorts and heirs. Leaked messages revealed plans to tighten estate rules, showing how serious the Sandringham conflict had become. King Charles pushed for unity in private talks with Camilla, but tension remained. History shows such disputes can cause long-lasting rifts, and aides even feared future copycat claims. Though Charles secured legal control, trust was shaken and cracks within the family were exposed. Publicly, unity was shown, but behind the scenes, influence shifted and unease lingered. Like past royal conflicts, the issue may be settled, but questions about ambition, loyalty, and the monarchy's future remain. Will the monarchy emerge stronger, or does this scandal reveal vulnerabilities that could threaten the crown? And what hidden ambitions still wait in the shadows? Discuss in the comments. What would have happened if King Charles had chosen differently? Should royals be held accountable like any public figure? Is this the end of the monarchy as we know it? For more untold royal stories, hit that subscribe button. The monarchy may seem timeless, but behind closed doors, history is still being written, one scandal at a time.